keeping it in. He's really good at voiceovers.
From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy. Real people, real problems, and real therapists. You can submit your questions anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. We have a special guest on today's show. One more poor soul who agreed to do this before discovering how terrible the show is.
Sucker!
And now, broadcasting from the Churn, that guy's Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Tangeman. It's time for some Pod Therapy.
The greatest testament to people's desire to see stigma go away is their willingness to talk to us at all.
I know, isn't that cool?
You deserve a medal. Like,
Yeah.
that's the great, like, sacrifice. This is like, oh, God, I just want to do what's right for humanity.
Yeah,
I guess I'll talk to these idiots.
I don't want to see stigma go away, but I would like to see stigmata go away.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
That's the thing we don't talk enough
Close
about.
enough, yeah.
You know, when is somebody going to talk about addressing the stigmata? Do you know what we're talking about?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, the hands,
Bleeding hand
bleeding
things.
hands.
Yeah.
I'm on
See,
board.
And
I'm with you.
This is really what May is all about.
Yeah,
May is the month that we bring up stigmata awareness. And this
is
is
it though? I feel like that should have its own month.
Yeah, that's right. I think September.
I don't know. Yeah, nothing's
September
going
stigmata
There you
awareness
go.
one. So we have a special guest that joined us in this episode, and we got to do a wonderful interview with the individual. And you'll find that he is a pretty well-known magician. He's done a very good job in his career and his success. We meet the man behind the act, though. We meet the man who just is the human being who has gone through his story. And really excited that we got to meet him and that he was honest with us and told us a little bit about addiction, told us a little bit about his own mental health and some of the co-occurring stuff. And we kind of stopped short of calling it co-occurring disorder, but that was kind of what I heard him describing.
Right.
And so really, really neat thing to get to do. So here's our interview with John, what's John Vanderput.
Vanderput.
John Vanderput. Check it out.
Harvey Blackstone.
John Harvey Blackstone Vanderput. Here it is. John, thank you so much for joining us, man. We're really excited to get to spend some time with you and talk about life and hear about some of your background story. This all kind of came to be because I got to hear you once on Penn Sunday School, and you were sharing about some of your history. You were sharing about some of the things you've gone through.
I was being hilarious.
And being very funny. Yeah.
About a very unhilarious period in my life. And now I can't be so much of a dick because I'm not wearing my dragon outfit, which gives me that
superpower,
social license to be horrific to people.
Yeah, it's easy to take a beating from a giant dragon. So yeah, man, you had written an entire poem about prescription drug abuse.
Song.
It was a song. Yeah, it was a song about prescription drug abuse. It was inspired and wonderful. And
well, I'm not sure. I mean, I thought it was hilarious, and certainly those around me at the time thought it was a cry for help.
Yeah. And
when I look back at it and read it now, I go, oh yeah, that's not funny at all.
Yeah, that's kind of the kind of morbid humor that I kind of picked up on the show that day, that it was funny looking back in some ways, but also probably the guy in that period of time was going through a lot. Can you tell us a little bit about what was happening in your life that kind of led to a relationship with opiates and painkillers?
Yeah. So I started getting sick when I was in my very early 20s. And when I went, I was in and out of hospital, and they didn't know what it was for about 2 years. So they were just giving me, they thought it was Crohn's, they thought it was colitis, they thought it was a bunch of stuff. So they would just sort of like have a bash at all these things. And meanwhile, I was in kind of constant, quite bad stomach pain. So I was taking painkillers for that. And then I was taking, whatever they would give me to try and figure it out. And then for the painkillers, I sort of took every painkiller under the sun. And so then they would give me, like cyclazine for the sickness, or tramadol for the pain, or fentanyl, or
Gave you
or
fentanyl.
morphine, or what? Oh yeah,
Wow.
And I had like slow release morphine and all this stuff, and I just had I could really just ask for as much as I wanted. And the doctors were telling me this. Now this was in 2002, I think. Yeah, 2002 to 2004 or 2006, maybe 2006. Yeah, it was 4 years during that period. So it wasn't like now when the opiate crisis has, a doctor is not going to, or a responsible doctor is going to have a lot more concerns now.
Right.
So at the time, they said there was no concern from any of the medical doctors that I was talking to about this, and probably because they didn't think that I would just take, I would start taking more than they were telling me to. But there were also, and so within those responsible doctors, there were also a couple of irresponsible doctors who would say, well, look, like you should take one every 4 hours, but if you need to, you can take more. So, at one point I was taking 4 pills every hour, and the dose was like 1 every 4 hours.
Wow.
And so, I think like once or twice I had to go in for overdosing, and sort of, sit in a hospital. But at the time I was in that hospital anyway, so it was just like most of the time I was in because my pancreas was giving up. So what they found out after 2 years was that I had chronic pancreatitis. And it was because in your pancreas you have 2 tubes which drain the fluids, and there's one large one, and then there's a very small one. And my large one wasn't formed, so it had a beginning and an end, but no middle. So whenever you're a tube, that's a terrible design flaw. That's 2 holes without, it's useless. So everything was going out this small hole, which would then get blocked up, and your pancreas secretes, I'm not telling you this, you guys I'm sure know this, but your pancreas secretes an enzyme which digests meat, which has a time delay on it. So if that enzyme doesn't get out quickly enough, it starts digesting your own pancreas, which causes very bad pain. And then once your pancreas gets damaged, it starts sending pain because, pain receptors, they're actually pain senders and receivers. Your body's always sending pain, and when your receivers get damaged, then that's when the pain gets through. So eventually, my pancreas didn't know what was going on, so it was just constantly sending pain. So by the end of the 2 years, they figured that out, and then I had 2 years where they were trying various ideas to get rid of it in ever increasing severity of solutions. So initially they tried to put a tube into the smaller hole, and but in the end they had to do a proper operation.
Well, one question I had, so at what point in this 4-year process would you say that the kind of abuse of it started, where you started taking it beyond what it was prescribed for?
Well, I mean, as soon as you take more than the recommended dose.
Right.
Just it's just a fact. But, I also think, look, I was very fortunate to come out of it. So, and by the time I got better, I think about 3 months before I had one final operation, I was like, okay, I've got to stop. I got to stop taking all of these, all of this medicine, because I was like doing things like picking spiders out of my shoes with tweezers, and I took one thing and just went blind for half an hour. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm just blind now. I guess that's the way it is.
Oh, geez.
So, it was pretty bad. And I was like, oh, it's time to stop this before it gets any worse. So, but, you know, even after I was better for about a year, I still had a cupboard that was literally stocked full of morphine. So, you know, it was pretty ropey stuff, but yeah, it was also in extreme times. So it wasn't like I think it would be much easier for me to answer that question if I was coming from, oh, well, I was doing, you know, I was healthy and then I found a cupboard full of drugs and started taking them. That'd be a much clearer answer, because, you know, like I said, I was in constant pain. And then also pain gets very, very strange when it's chronic, because you're not sure whether you're in pain anymore or whether you're just imagining it, whether it's psychosomatic. It starts getting very, very messy. So
yeah. I have a quick question for you. You mentioned you were in hospital a few times for the overdoses while you were already in the hospital. What were the doctor's reactions to that?
Sometimes I was coming into the hospitals sometimes I would have an attack of pancreatitis and have to go to hospitals, and then I would also overdose and go to hospitals.
Okay.
So, you know.
But did the doctors have extreme reactions to you coming in with the overdosing as well?
It's funny. You can get chronic pancreatitis two ways. One is, and the very rare way is the way that I had it, which was a congenital defect, and the other is by alcoholism. So I would actually get no sympathy when I came in with the pancreatitis, because they thought I'd done it to myself by drinking, even though I was far too young to really have done that. So
yeah, my mom has lung cancer, and she gets the same thing. She never smoked, but she has lung cancer, and she gets the same, like, no sympathy thing.
Well, you know, and even if you smoke, like, you know, it's just
still
like
shitty.
Yes, I have some sympathy.
Right. Yeah.
Sick person's
It's not,
a sick
you know,
person.
it's like it just doesn't help, and you know, it's a very strange society we live in, where some things are stigmatized. You know, some drugs are stigmatized, others aren't. You know, alcohol is promoted as a social drug, coffee is, and you know, they can be destructive in everything. Can be destructive in different ways. You know, working too hard can be as destructive as smoking.
So one question I have is that you mentioned the complexity of this, that chronic pain is a very deep emotional experience, and it's also this very physical thing, and at some point these medicines become both, right? They're taming some of the emotional pain and anguish, they're giving peace, they're dealing with some of the physical pain, then the pain comes roaring back. When you got to the end of this cycle that you were in, it sounds like you reached a place of self-recognition, that you looked around and said, oh no, you know, look at me picking out spiders, look at me going blind, I'm reaching a place of recognition? Or were there people in your life that kind of confronted you and said, hey, this isn't okay anymore, you need help? And how did you ultimately stop using it?
No, I was nobody really confronted me. You know, partly because the illness was definitely covering up the other side of it, I think. And people really felt powerless to help, because, you know, what are they going to say? Hey, don't take this medicine, or, you know, just take one amount, because at the end of the day, they didn't really take the edge of it. And I don't really think, you know, with any of you know, for me, like, an addiction is something that is much more of a personality trait for myself, and it bounces between different areas. And none of these things are really about finding peace. They're usually about sort of a distraction or a way to, you know, a way to sort of not, to sort of speed time up through whatever is whatever I want to avoid feeling or experiencing. So, you know, yeah, I could take a lot of medicine and then you know, not experience what I was what I was experiencing then, which was constant pain and a lot of fear and a lot of this and a lot of that. So and in the end, the operation I had was a very high. It was like a 25% chance of going wrong and dying and all that stuff. So it was like not something that I, there were clear reasons why I didn't want to experience that stuff.
You mentioned that there's a history not just of addiction to this particular medicine that got out of control, but you've noticed that pattern in your life. And in Penn Sunday School, you had also referenced that alcohol at one point had become just too much, and you kind of reached a place also with that where it sounded like you kind of self-corrected. And
alcohol was the greatest one that was the easiest one to give up. God, I love giving up alcohol. If everything was like that, it would be, addiction would not be a problem. So I couldn't drink that much because even now, my pancreas is not the same as everyone else's. So, alcohol is not very healthy for a pancreas. But I would find that when I would drink, then I would, I would happily drink a bottle of wine and, by the glass and sort of like almost like chug the glass every time I did it. And when I would drink one glass of wine, I would suddenly drink a bottle, 2 bottles, or whatever I was drinking. But I when I gave up alcohol, my life got so much better that what I'd given up was far less than what I got back, and that's really only been, that's most of the other things I've given up has been a long period of going, like smoking. For a year I missed smoking. A year, every day I would wake up, I really want a cigarette every day. And alcohol, maybe for like 3 months I would think, I quite like a drink, but I've got so much more done and I'm feel so much better that I don't really want to drink.
Wow. So
I was fortunate in that way because I've had friends who had horrible struggles with alcohol.
Yeah, and that is pretty rare. A lot of times when people give up a substance, life doesn't get better. It actually sometimes gets worse because then you still have the same problems you had before, only now you have to deal with it sober without that added comfort. So yeah, that's pretty fortunate that it worked out that way.
Yeah, so I got a bit of a pass on alcohol, but even now, last year I think I went to I got an IV, a vitamin IV, and as soon as they plugged the needle in, I was like, oh, I want some morphine. Because it was kicking back into when I was in hospital.
I was going to ask you after that episode, as you've gone through the rest of your life, do you now have a rule for yourself where pain will not require opiates, or is that something that you negotiate?
I don't think you can. I mean, you can, but it's very, very unpleasant. I had this thing where they put a tube down your throat. I had to have that, and they use like benzos when they do that stuff, and I had it once without benzos, and it was really horrific. So a lot of these drugs, you're gonna have a patient, they're gonna sedate you, right? And as soon as they do, then when I wake up, I'm asking where the medicine cabinet is, and so now I've just sort of said to people I know and trust, I've said, just ignore, just sort of like cold turkey me for a day, and then I'll return to normal. And thankfully, I don't have to go through that very often. But this stuff is so biological, or whatever you want to. It's very hard to resist, and I've certainly stopped giving myself a hard time for when those feelings come up, because it doesn't really help me to try and it doesn't help me to feel bad for these feelings. It's much more effective for me just to accept them and try and channel that into a more positive way. But like there are periods where I'll eat more than I should, and I'm comfort eating. There are periods when I'm spending more than I should, when I'm working more than I should. I think that balance for me, it comes and goes, and certainly my 30s have been a lot better than my 20s.
Yeah. And I want to ask this question too. Sometimes whenever people have that addictive trait and they find themselves abusing, different substances throughout time, if they're able to get that under control, it works for a while. In your case, in your 20s, at least as I understood it on Penn Sunday School, you weren't famous. You were a regular guy.
Right.
You had a job. You were going through your life. Now, in your 30s, you've become world famous. Has that in any way made it harder, or in some ways perhaps made it easier because the stakes are now so much higher to keep yourself under control?
Yeah, in London, people are always like, oh, you're moving to Vegas and you struggle with addictions, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. Whereas actually I found Vegas to be great, very pleasant. Because Vegas is like, it pretends that all this stuff, it's like, oh, you're going to get drugs and hookers and drinking and gambling. But it's like that stuff is almost regulated. Mm-hmm. Whereas in London, it's all very much like behind closed doors. So it's I actually found being out here, and I love doing shows. I love being busy, and so the more successful I've become, the more I've been able to do more shows I enjoy, choose my own work, and I've had a very stable relationship with Jade for the last almost 5 something years. So all of that has sort of like worked itself out, really.
It sounds like that's actually made it easier for you to avoid relapsing into problematic stuff.
Yeah, and also the decisions I've made over the, I've sort of realized that building a stable home or a stable work life helps everything else. Because for a long time I was like, oh, why am I doing whatever I was doing? And then I would sit down and talk to somebody about it, and I'd be like, oh yeah, it's pretty clear. It's because I'm in constant pain, or like I don't have any money, or I'm like in an incredible stressed state all the time. So
yeah.
Well, and you brought up a really good point, that I want to kind of emphasize for a lot of our listeners, which is that how slippery of a slope it can be, especially at that time period, in the early 2000s, when there was a lot of misleading information with opioid prescriptions and just kind of how it was presented by pharmaceutical reps and all that. But also just the idea of like, I have pain, I have a legitimate physical disorder, therefore I have a prescription. And then even it gets a little gray too when we're talking about, are you taking it as prescribed? Well, I am by this doctor.
Right.
Not by this doctor, but by this doctor I am.
Yeah, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, and especially at that time, and I think that, kind of emphasizes the point that we should have some empathy, a lot more empathy as a society for, what people are going through as far as, recovery, especially from opiates. And how easy it is for people to slide into this. Because I think a lot of people, especially like when we talk about heroin, because I've worked with a lot of heroin addicts, and I think a lot of people have the misconception that they just started using heroin, or they were, using alcohol, then switched to heroin. Well, most of them kind of fell into it the same way that you got into the opiates. It was a medical condition. They had a prescription, could no longer get the prescription, and had to get the heroin.
John, one question I have for you is, at the amount that you were using, how did you stop? Did you need medicine to help you stop?
No, because I was horribly, horribly sick. So I could stop, and I would still, whether I was taking it or not, I would feel horrific.
Right.
So I was able to, I stopped taking it, and I felt slightly better.
Right. You were going to suffer anyway. May as well just get it all done in one go.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's why. Whereas I think if I'd have taken it on like a blank canvas, then it would have been a lot more problematic. And other things have been, more problematic for me. But at the time, and it's not a nice thing to take. It's like you know, I had a lot of, I can't remember the side effects now, but there was definitely shaking, sweating, like grinding my teeth. You know, my eyes were dilated. I was a pretty hot mess. So it wasn't like, you know, all of that was an improvement when I stopped taking it. And all of this stuff, it's like, it is really difficult to stop, but it passes. You know, it doesn't take that long.
Yeah.
Compared to your life.
Right. You go through a bad week.
And so I don't think it's very helpful when people are like, oh, well, how are you going to go through that withdrawal? It's like, you're going to get through it and it'll be over before you know it. And you'll be out the other side, and then you won't have the absolute horror show that you were living with on a daily basis. And you'll have the gratitude of that. And then very quickly, it will all seem worth it.
Right. One question I had too was, you know, coming up in London, I've had a lot of folks, international folks, who have shared with me that there's a very peculiar stigma about mental health and behavioral health, sometimes in Europe and sometimes especially in London, and maybe a stiff upper lip kind of mentality. We don't complain, we don't observe. Did you find that that was ever something that contributed to the problem, that if you did need help, or some of the conditions that were underlying all this, that the reason we were drinking, the reason we used drugs, the reason we had addictive patterns to hide the emotions or to mask things, did you ever find that there was sort of a stigma that it wasn't okay to seek help or to talk to somebody?
Not really, because no, hang on, let me just rephrase it. I think there's, like I was saying, it's like, you know, I was raised in a very strict evangelical church. So if you were smoking cigarettes, then you would be going to hell. So I definitely took on that judgment because it made me, you know, be able to separate myself from others and you know, feel better about myself. And now I would say that's a very clear example of that. You know, if somebody's smoking, they're going to hell. Now, rationally, it's very easy to look at that and say, well, that's ridiculous. But that judgment, like you say, is there on like people who take heroin, people who you know, have a gambling addiction, and meanwhile, people who are you know, horribly addicted to work or a whole bunch of different things, you know, overeating or whatever it is, you know, they judge in order to feel better about themselves. And, you know, that's why I loved judging people, because it meant I could give myself a pass. Oh, I'm not doing that. And then when I started having real problems, you know, that all sort of came crumbling down. And I just think it's so, you know, this thing about like good drugs, oh, the doctor prescribed it, so that's okay. And bad drugs, oh, you smoke weed, so that's bad. But sometimes you smoke weed and that's fine. Sometimes, at the end of the day, I just felt like it's just about whether it's making my life manageable or unmanageable. And for any substance, anything, any like behavior, I just ended up having to say to myself, does this make my life unmanageable or more or manageable? And that became the thing, because I think like this judgment thing is just rife.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And I think it also takes a pretty good amount of insight to be able to ask that question and to be able to answer it honestly, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So coming here to America and living your life the way you have, how do you have balance now? You talked about how you try to stay in a manageable place. You have pretty good work-life balance, relationship balance. What is your self-care strategy that has allowed you to be successful and not go back to those old addictive masking behaviors?
I don't know really, because I felt like I fought all of my life until I was probably early 30s with various addictions. And I felt like throughout that period, I was getting nowhere, even though the reality is I was giving them up one by one. It just felt like I wasn't making progress. And then eventually, like I said, my life was manageable enough. And then I felt like I didn't have to fight as much. And then suddenly, because I wasn't like in a massive conflict all the time, then my anxiety went down hugely. And then I didn't want to, lean on any of my addictions so much. And so it's sort of like, it's all describes like one thing for the other. Mm-hmm. Because, and they always call that the addictive cycle as well. Like, and when it's going the other way and it's like your addictions are ramping up, then like the anxiety is feeding the addiction, which feeds the anxiety, which feeds the addiction. So, the more I was able to give up, and also get under the control, because some of them you can't give up, you can't. But we all have to work, we all have to have relationships, we all have to eat food. Those are the ones that you can't just never eat again or whatever it is. So, but once they started like ramping down, then the anxiety would go down a bit, and then so the need to act out will go down a bit. So it was just a slow process that I didn't really find any shortcuts to.
Yeah.
And luckily enough, the things that would kill me, then I was able to put those down before they did.
Yeah.
And I just think that's luck. That part of it I just think is luck. Because I had plenty of good friends who weren't able to do that.
Yeah, I think it's hard whenever you see it firsthand and you've seen it in other people. And it's hard because it's hard to know how to help them, But I think by telling your story, it starts to give at least that sense of hope that it can get better for a lot of folks. Throughout your life, it sounds like you've gone through anxiety. You've gone through depression. You know those things firsthand. You know how you tried to self-medicate and how that ultimately made that worse and fed that cycle. It sounds like you were able to break your cycle by starting to pull back from some of those self-medications that got in the way. Have you ever?
But no. I don't think I've ever really been depressed, other than after I was ill, and that I was depressed for a good reason, because I'd gone through 4 years and now I couldn't. I had a very big operation. It was like being in a car crash. So and a chunk of my 20s had really been, I guess wasted maybe. But all my life I've dealt with massive anxiety, and I had to get to a place where I went, oh, this isn't normal. This is objectively mismatched with what's going on in my life. This is like a fight or flight reaction to a situation that doesn't exist. And when I realized that, that I had to find some sort of medical treatment for that. And, because it's easy enough to say, oh, you should exercise, you should eat, you should do that. Well, guess what? I did all that and it didn't go away. So I had to try a bunch of antidepressants, and they take 3 months to make sure they're working or not. I tried one thing and I woke up and I was like, oh, I think I should jump out of a building today. And luckily I was able to ring up the doctor and say, I believe I should jump out of a building. And fortunately, because I'd had that experience with picking out invisible spiders and understanding that just because I thought something was real doesn't mean it is. I was able to ring up a doctor immediately and say, oh, I think I should jump out of a building. So what do I do next? And they had to really talk me down off it. It was not emotionally.
Right.
Just as in logically, because I was like, oh no, I should just jump out of a building. So they were like, you have to do this, drink water. I can't remember what they said. I had to drink water. I had to do this. I had to get this prescription. But it was like a physiological, biological thing. And eventually I found a medicine that didn't alter my mood, because that was important. Because if it changed the way I was feeling, then I knew that I would abuse it. And and it got rid of that crazy, fight or flight anxiety level. But that was just something that I couldn't work through myself. I just had to realize that I needed, that was a chemical thing.
And then that's really good insight that you have, and that's something we've talked about a lot on the show before, is this idea that feelings aren't facts, and being able to recognize that even though I feel this way, I feel like jumping off the roof. That doesn't mean that like this is part of the chemical reaction going on in my head. I don't have to act on that. And that's really good insight that you had, that you got from the use of the opiates. Another thing that I wanted to point out too is that you kind of talked a while back about with the substance use and getting to that point where when you had that, I can't remember how we worded it, that desire, that craving, or whatever it was, that trigger, to not assign any kind of meaning to it, like this is bad or I shouldn't be feeling this way, but just to kind of accept it. Like, okay, this is interesting. I have this, I got that IV and I'm having this sensation. That's interesting. And not putting a label to it. And that's something that we've kind of talked about before on the show with, even with anxiety, is this radical acceptance of I'm feeling anxious, being able to recognize and identify it, but not have to put a meaning to it. Like, this is bad. I shouldn't be feeling this way, because then it kind of puts added pressure that something's wrong, and then that kind of increases the anxiety. It's just anxiety about anxiety at that point. So I think that was...
Yeah, I found it really, like I was saying, it really feeds itself.
Yeah.
The anxiety feeds the addiction and vice versa. But once I started, I went to a lot of 12-step meetings for 4 or 5 years, I think, for a long time. And I found them very, very helpful. And, I remember hearing things like, this guy was like, oh, I finally got it. I'm never going to get it. And I was like, oh, wow, that's like huge. Because I wanted to like graduate from that, from my addictions. And I kind of realized that in some way or another, they're always going to be there. But the amount that personality trait has also been useful to me, I can't really understate. Like when I'm problem solving, I'm a magician, so I'm always trying to do something that you can't do, and keep like circling in on a solution, and all of that behavior is very, very closely tied to how I would act looking for whatever addictive hit I was looking for.
Yeah.
So I see it now as like two sides of the same coin.
I think that's
right.
true.
It's like, the good side of it means that I've been able to, I've been very lucky in being able to achieve a lot of my career goals, and then, and also like, do what I do in terms of the show or anything like that. And then the negative side, the tails, the flip side is something that I have to manage and be careful of, and just sort of know my limitations with it.
Yeah.
I definitely hear in your voice a sense of respect, understanding that things can go very wrong very fast.
Oh, within hours.
Yeah.
Within hours.
It's a powder keg ready to explode, and there's a deep reverence for that. It's interesting. There's multiple things that you said throughout our conversation today that definitely made me think he's been through 12-step. He's using some of the language.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's been part of your success, part of your story. What is one of the biggest takeaways that you got from the rooms and the meetings that you keep with you?
There were a lot, but definitely that everyone that I think sometimes people talk about addicts and non-addicts, and to a degree I think that's true, but I also think that we're all much more alike than we are different. So that's been reassuring to me. Some of the more insane things that I think, it was a huge comfort to know that other people would think the same. And just like the main thing is just to try and stop before I would do something. I had a friend last year, and he committed suicide out of nowhere, and nobody saw it coming. Blah blah blah. Like a lot of these things, and I just think there have been plenty of times when that could have been me, not because I was in like a terrible sad place or anything like that, just because I could have made the wrong stupid decision at the wrong time. And certainly like removing the judgment from all of it and just go, okay, that, yeah, I think that's what I took from it. Just like a lot slower, and just a lot slower to judge, make myself a lot slower to act, and to realize that any sort of success I've had in this has basically been as much about luck as it has been about work.
Sounds like you try to stay very humble as well.
Yes, but only because that's the only thing that would make sense confronted with the facts. I was like waking up in blackout, from blackouts, not knowing where I was. I was being shown things I didn't remember, and for me to go, oh well, somehow I managed to guide myself through that period. And like, no, it's just like, luckily enough, I didn't throw myself off a building during that period.
Right.
Yeah. There was a time when one of the reasons I stopped drinking was I was staying in this apartment, and it had this gate that you had to enter a code to get through, and I'd forgotten the code, so I decided to scale this fence and jump over it. And in London, all of the fences, they have these very sharp spikes on the top. So I navigated these very sharp spikes, when I was very, very drunk and whatever I was, and sort of fell over the wall and landed on my feet, and got to the door. And when I put my hand into my pocket to get my keys, I found the piece of paper with the code on it.
Oh, wow.
And I was just like, I could have just killed myself.
Wow.
I could have easily killed myself. I decided that the only sensible thing to do was to scale a fence. And then, it turns out I had the paperwork time. And even though that sounds a very stupid, minor story, like that's how people die.
Right.
Yeah. No, that's true.
Yeah. So, I was just grateful to have made it through.
Yeah. And I think there's a huge thing to say there for recognizing our own inability. A lot of people don't do that. A lot of people think, it's fine, when they're confronted by friends and family, and they say, hey, this is scaring us. You're doing really dangerous things. Oh, I'm fine. You guys make a big deal out of it. It's not that big of a deal. Sounds like for you didn't necessarily have a lot of that denial. You can kind of see it inside of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was things that I didn't, the other thing was that, like, I didn't want to really be doing this stuff. I was doing it, like I was saying, to escape a lot of anxiety. So, I think I've had friends who've had a different experience of addiction where they've gone out looking for a good time. And then that has become a problem down the road. And again, the other thing I learned from being in 12-step rooms was that everyone has very different ways in or experiences, but there's always somebody who has had your experience or my experience.
Right. Yeah. Do you have any advice for anybody that might be going or trying a 12-step meeting for the first time?
I don't know. I stopped going in the end because in Vegas, I found them kind of crazy, and I found a different way to do it. So, I think one of the dangers is you go, well, this is like my last resort.
Oh,
so that's definitely, if 12-step doesn't work for you, then there'll be something that works.
Right.
So definitely, if you find it's not a good fit, then don't give up. But equally, it's like hugely successful for a lot of people. So
yeah.
And we have a lot of, as I'm sure you know, we have a lot of listeners that are not religious. Can you talk about that aspect of the 12-step and just dealing with that as someone who was once religious, or just talk about that. I'm gonna put words in your mouth.
I think that's the thing that I find hardest these days now, is because, when I was, I look back and I go, okay, well, where did this anxiety come from? And maybe some of it is, biological or genetic or whatever. But certainly some of it came from feeling like, there's an eternity that is separated into either heaven, which is for me, it was a waking existence without a break, and that was already terrifying.
Right.
And then the other side of it was there's also a hell where it's like eternal pain. So that huge level of anxiety was created with that, but also a belief in God was created. So I think the 12-step thing can be, some people find the higher power thing really useful. Some people I know who are atheists find a way to make it work for them, because that's the thing about 12 steps is like, there's nothing in it which says that your higher power has to be an actual God. So some people find a way to thread that needle. And then, I found and I still do, that my experience of that religion is, religion, or whether there is or is not a God or something out there. I find that that's not very helpful for me to think about, because there's no answer. Otherwise, we would have it. There's a great Philip K. Dick book where somebody proves the existence of God, and it changes everything about the world. So although we all, like, maybe we're not we all, but a lot of us, like, look for the truth, then no, we're clearly not going to get a light bulb moment.
Yeah.
So I've just found that I have to, like, be okay with that ambiguity and find a way through it. And in that way, that none of that was affected by the 12-step program. I found I could have a home in the 12-step program with that belief happily.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great.
But there's always a lot of excuses to not do something, and and that's a good excuse to walk away from a 12-step room.
Yeah, that's true.
So, John, I definitely want to honor your time. I want to thank you so much, because being Mental Health Awareness Month, it's an opportunity for us to try to increase people's awareness. And I think to hear that a person that has reached your level of success relates to the average listener who might be going through the same thing, and hearing how a person succeeded and got through it, and hearing that empathy in your voice and that sense of understanding and non-judgment, I know it means the world to a lot of folks. And there's people that may be on the edge as they're listening to this, especially during the pandemic. We're hearing more and more of skyrocketing rates of painkiller abuse and anxiety. A second ago, we asked what advice you'd have for somebody who's just starting 12-step, and you had said, hey, don't give up. There's always another option. Lean in. Last question to you is, what advice might you have for somebody out there who's just feeling hopeless, feeling despair? Maybe they're riddled with anxiety as you once were, and maybe they've tried in all the wrong ways to fix it.
I think and it's funny, you mentioned, like, the success and things. That the happiest I've been is when I was like just scraping a living with this stuff, doing what I love, because at the end of the day, from a career level, it just gets more challenging. The more successful I've become, the more challenges, and they're kind of like luxury problems. They're high class problems, but they're still problems. They still still take a lot of time to deal with. So that doesn't solve anything. And one of my friends, in fact, my sponsor actually, he was just like, well, just today everything's fine, right? And I was like, yeah, he's like, you have enough to eat today, and you have enough, you have a roof over your head and this sort of this. And if I didn't, by the way, then I'd have to fix that for today. I would never try and fix it for tomorrow. Just fix it for today. And I found that was the most useful thing to really just like start enjoying today, because unless you can enjoy that, it's not going to get much better. And I think until there's like you have some sort of life that's like if I was still in chronic pain from pancreatitis, I wouldn't find it as simple as I do today to not take morphine.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's like, it really is about just trying to do the best you can for today and just make that day at a time progress.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the only thing that changes it long term. And then you start looking back after a week or a month or a year, and you start going, oh, actually, I have come a long way. But I gave up like morphine. I gave up like a real opiate dependency, and I absolutely felt like I'd made no progress in addiction for 4 years.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And I look back and I'm like, oh my God, that was huge. And then at the time, I just didn't see it. So
yeah, incredibly huge.
One day at a time.
Yep.
Anything that stops you from jumping off that building today is huge.
Yes.
Because it means you get another chance tomorrow and another chance the day after, and it's just that incremental progress, and then suddenly, and I always, last thing I'll say is, I used to have this thing where when I was in hospital, I felt like I'd always been in hospital, and when I was out of hospital, I felt like I'd never been in hospital. So I would go in to hospital and come out 3 or 4 weeks later, and 3 days later, I felt like I'd never been in hospital. And I think that's that's like this, the human way of dealing with this, with life as it is. So however like crazy and hopeless it seems, it's amazing how quickly that can change.
Yeah.
And a week or 2 days later, you can be like, the fuck was I thinking?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Good point.
And so no matter how bad things seem, listener, it may seem like that's the way it's always going to be. One day you'll look at your life and think, I can't believe I ever thought that. That you'll feel as infinitely far away from that moment as this moment feels infinitely permanent today. That's just a perspective. John, thank you so much for sharing with us. Thank you for being willing to break the stigma, to show folks that there's a way forward. And I think you've given us a lot of hope today. I think a lot of people are going to hear this and feel like, all right, if that guy can do it, maybe I can too.
Yeah.
Right. And the next time people are watching me on stage making a child cry, they'll be like,
yeah,
wow, that guy's a real
That's
dick.
his anti-drug. At least he's sober.
I keep saying maybe you shouldn't tell this whole story as part of your stage act, but you don't change, and that's it.
Yeah,
the big
this
finale.
is the opening 45 minutes.
Yeah, people are leaning in.
Children sobbing.
When does he do the magic thing? I thought, wasn't there like a nice dog?
All right,
John, thank you so much.
Yeah,
for
thank
joining
you
us.
so much. We appreciate
Thanks,
it.
guys. Bye.
Right.
Take
Bye.
care, brother. Well, that was great.
Cool.
A lot of fun, man. Really great guy.
Yeah.
And, I think that's a huge message. I think everybody needs to hear that message. And, I think it's fantastic because he doesn't downplay it. He's,
right.
One of the most important things that he said that I thought, oh, God, I hope everybody heard that. One was shame, that this in no way serves me to think about this shamefully or guilt. That doesn't work. It's about what works, not whether it's true or false, about what works. Talked about the same thing with God. He said it doesn't help me to contemplate that. I don't personally like that thought, so I avoid it. That's fine. I give myself permission and I don't have an answer. But another thing was, at all moments, I respect the danger that this poses to my life.
Yes.
Do you remember once you had that idea of the tiger you wanted to bring into the rehab?
I said, because I said that. I said, if I had my way.
If there were no laws.
If there were no laws and no ethics boards, I would give everybody who came in and started in early addiction, I would give them all a pet tiger. And that's going to be your own little pet tiger to take care of.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because regardless of how well you take care of it, it's always a tiger.
Right.
And people always get hurt the same way when they stop respecting it.
Yeah.
You know, when they start playing around with it and they start poking it with a stick, that's when you get your face ripped off.
Yeah.
And it's a perfect analogy for addiction, because you have to have respect for addiction. You have to understand that, yeah, I've been clean and sober for 4 years now. I got this. When the moment you say you got this, it means that you've kind of lost respect for it.
That's right.
And what he was talking about is like, oh yeah, like in an hour, like it, you know, everything can change very quickly. As soon as you lose respect for it, you start playing around with it, you don't understand, you forget what it can do, then that's when it comes back and rips your face off.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you know, that was just, I found that to be profound, you know, to have somebody kind of take off the costume and say, you know, I'm a real human being, just like all of you, and I was the guy in the bed next to you at the hospital going through, you know, pain and addiction stuff. And, you know, just how relatable is that? And then to have it turn into a message of hope, but also a message of caution and reality, and saying, hey, don't delude yourself. You know, see the problem behaviors that you're doing, see the self-destruction. And if you find that you're doing that, if you find that you are doing self-destructive things that don't make any sense, and as John said, unmanageable. You know, that of course, as soon as you and I heard that word, we thought, oh, he's been to the rooms. You know, but he talked about, it's about making my life manageable. These things do not assist me in making my life manageable. And then he gives himself permission to say, I just judge it one day at a time. If I was still going through pancreatitis, perhaps I would listen to the doctor and we would incorporate medicine into my regime. That would be judged on a day-to-time basis and be scaled by its manageability.
You know, another thing too, I like the fact that, you know, when we're talking about the anxiety, that medication was an option. You know, it wasn't something that's like, nope, can't take meds. It's like, okay, well, yeah, I've tried, and he tried all these other things, you know, and if you try something and it doesn't work, that doesn't mean you just give up. I mean, you go to the next thing, and you're going to try some medications, and there's no medication that works consistently for everybody. It is a little bit of trial and error, you know, and you have to be patient and go through that process.
Yeah. So special thanks to John, who joined us for Mental Health Awareness Month. And, you know, shout out to anybody out there who's inspired by this story. Don't keep it a secret. Get out there just like he did and let the world know that they're going to be okay. Each one reach one. Keep your story in front of other people. Give them hope. Stay inspired. And I think if we can all believe that it gets better, it will get better. And that's something I want everybody to hold on to. So with that, we will take our first break. And when we come back, we are going to discuss a relationship affected by Corona. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
This week's TheraProducer sponsor is Ellie O'Dare. Today's first trivia question in honor of TheraProducer Ellie O'Dare is, voiced by Benedict Cumberbatch in the cinematic release, this dragon is the main antagonist to J.R.R. Tolkien's 1937 novel, The Hobbit. If you'd like to join Ellie O'Dare and make the show possible, you can go to patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy.
I know it.
Back.
He knows the answer.
I know it.
Do you really?
I do.
Are you into that universe? No. Okay. You just happen to know the name of the dragon?
That is a piece of information.
That's lodged.
my parents or my grandmother either read me that book, The Hobbit, when I was a kid. And the name of the dragon, for some reason, has stuck in my head for my life.
Really?
Yeah. I couldn't tell you anything else about that entire thing. But for some reason, the name of the dragon sticks in my head.
All right. I got to know. What is it?
Smaug.
Smaug?
Yeah.
Oh, that's not true.
Yes.
No, it's true.
The dragon's name is Smaug?
Like smog,
It
but
sounds
not
like
quite.
that's what you're doing.
Yeah. It's not
like
quite smog.
You're like swankifying smog.
Yes.
Like, it's smoggy out here.
It's pretty much exactly it.
Yeah, that is a memorable name.
Yeah. For some, like,
fair.
since I was a child, that name has stuck in my head.
Yeah, that feels right.
Yeah.
Smaug.
I do own a first edition of The Hobbit.
Oh my God.
That I found at a fun antique used bookstore years ago.
I wonder what that's worth.
And it's worth something.
Yeah.
It's not nothing.
Not nothing.
I don't think it's like incredible or anything.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I bought it from people that. Oh, sorry. It's not a first edition. It is a first edition of the illustrated version.
Oh, okay.
So that beautiful illustration that was done in the 70s that they then made the cartoon movie out of. It's that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, it's cool, but it's not like a.
Yeah.
Like it's probably worth a couple of $100.
Wow.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's still way more invested in something that you have no attachment to than I thought you'd be.
Well, I found it, and I was like, this is super cool.
It's cool. It's valuable. I guess you're going to grab it.
No, but you seem like the antique type. Like you enjoy going to antique.
I love
malls
that
stuff.
stuff.
Like
When I think of
yeah,
Jacob, I
it's
think
fun.
antiquing.
I don't go antiquing. That's not true. But like I mean, antiques and books like that, rare books like that. I'm really interested in.
You should incorporate
and especially like an
this.
illustrated book.
Oh, yeah.
Like a really neat illustration of a book is I think is a really neat thing.
I didn't know you had treasures. I think you should incorporate this into robe time. It should be show and tell. You should have it's like Pee Wee Herman has a special thing of the day.
Right.
Jacob's like, and this is my limited edition.
Jacob's bourbon and antique books.
Right.
Why not? Why not? It's halfway there. It's so fancy.
That'd be pretty much it.
It's pretty much there already. All he's to do is show and tell his antique or whatever random treasure he has. It's like, okay, there you go. This is a first edition Moby Dick. I don't know why I have this. Anyway.
We do have lots of really interesting and weird stuff in our house. We have several antique toys.
Yes.
That are worth something, but toys from the early 1900s.
Oh wow.
Again, not worth a lot,
but interesting.
But and also just weird that we have them.
Yeah.
It's like, why does Jacob and SJ have this? Who knows?
Yeah. What is this? Oh, that. That's an 1850s original doll. Why do you have that?
Who knows?
Because he's the fucking Highlander, and I've been saying it this whole time.
No.
Jig is up, dude.
That's it.
They
Jig
weren't
is up.
antiques when he bought them.
Yeah. It's weird I have all this.
You also have not been saying that the whole time. You've definitely been saying that for a week.
It's been 1 week that I've been correct. I've been right. Hey guys, thank you for continuing with the show. You're welcome. It provides a refreshing level of continuity in these uncertain times. That being said, since I'm no longer driving by Tim Hortons when I come home from work, I figured why not give you guys my donut money? I like my advice honey dipped, if you please. Sounds like a Canadian. As elementary schools, kindergarten to grade 5, so ages 5 to 11, start reopening with a new sense of what is normal, how do you think teachers can support mental health in terms of the kids and fellow staff? Any thoughts for those of us not opening until next September, almost 6 months after the last day of school? Attached are the guidelines, oh neat, released by one of the schools opening in May. I added arrows to each item that I think might affect students' mental health the most. Cheers, coffee maple scoop. Interesting. Oh, you've got the list there.
I got it, yeah.
What things
printed
jump
it
off the list there?
Okay, so these are guidelines, I guess?
Yeah.
So once assigned to a class, students will spend their entire day, including lunchtime, in their assigned seats.
Ooh, geez, that's hard to do. 5 years old, trying to keep them glued to a seat? Okay,
Yeah.
go on. What else is on the red arrow
students
list?
must not expect to return to their regular classes with their classmates.
Oh.
Your child may not be with the same teacher as before, as several members of our staff will not be returning to school.
Oh, wow.
Sharing of all items, pencils, pens, sharpeners, wax crayons, rulers, toys, is not permitted.
Really? Oh, wow, they can't share their...
Nope.
Okay.
When weather permits, recess breaks will be held outdoors and will entail of walking outside safely distanced from one another in a prearranged pattern.
That definitely sounds like a prison.
It does. All of this sounds like a prison.
Wow.
It's they even call it yard time.
No.
I'm kidding, they don't. Gatherings, groups of students together, will not be permitted.
Wow.
Bathroom visits will be monitored, escorted, so that the proper disinfectant by your caretaker can follow before another student uses the facilities.
Wow.
And there will be no physical activity taking place in the gym, no art classes, although art and craft projects can be promoted as home suggestions.
Wow.
No library periods, no drama classes.
Wow. So that is a... First off, thank you for sending this, Coffee Maple. You know, thank you that, we're getting kind of a real inside view of an actual list of things that a school is considering implementing. That's a lot.
Is this considering or is this...
Sounds like this is happening, yeah.
That's the guidelines. So it's a good question. I mean, so I think any human who reads that list immediately sees how difficult that is to implement. I mean, my daughter's 5, and if she's going to start kindergarten next year, and I'm concerned about this. If she goes into school and she's told, sit still, do not get out of your desk, she is not going to succeed very well.
You couldn't follow these guidelines.
I can't do it. Yeah, that's right. So it's really hard for kids. And then, like, you're teaching them all these things, like, hey, when you have to go potty, you raise your hand, and like, we're fostering independence. But then at the same time, we're teaching them, like, to fear this at all times, and like, don't trade things and don't hand out. And like, little kids share toys. They share lunch. They trade lunch. They all sit next to each other and eat and drink and talk and make a mess. They're little kids. And so it's just really, really hard to imagine how you're supposed to implement this, how you're supposed to, and I feel terrible for the teachers. I feel terrible for the staff.
My anxiety automatically shot up reading this because that's who I empathized with.
Oh, yeah.
Is the folks who have to enforce this is going to be really tough.
And that's hard too, especially if you're a human with lungs and you're like, hey, I'm scared to catch this. Here's all these little kids that I'm supposed to be nose to nose with. And when you teach little kids, that's what you do. You kneel next to their desk and you lean in while they're looking at the paper.
That's what I do.
You talk right to them when you're mentoring the youth of today.
Yep.
That's how you when Jacob, life coach, math tutor.
What do you want? That's what I do.
Whatever's needed, really.
Mommy, my math tutor smells like bourbon.
Shut it.
Yeah, but effective. Get results, kid.
How do you? Okay, so but one of the questions that the writer asks is, how do you think this would affect mental health of a student?
Yeah.
How do you think this is going to affect their development?
Kids adapt extremely quickly, and I think that you've seen this throughout time, that there's lots of different ways to do school, but there needs to be said that if you look at the mental health of students in the strictest possible academic environments, such as Korea, it's very bad. And suicidality and depression are extremely bad in those environments. Now, there's also extracultural exchange in there, such as not allowed to get help and things like highly competitive, order. But if you look at highly restricted environments, we already have kind of some good data to draw from, some real examples that teach us that's not the greatest way for children, to learn, to be actually academic successful and get you the results you're looking for, but also that it's not great for their general health. And physical health, too, I'd add as well. So it is problematic. But I also think I look at this thing and say, okay, let's anticipate that there's going to be negatives. I think most humans that look at this say it's not going to be harmless. These guidelines do not look like they're benign. They look like they're going to have a negative impact. So then the question becomes a progressive one. So what can we do? How can we as adults, if you're a teacher, if you're an administrator, if you're a family member, what can you be doing with kids to try to adapt to this? I think it's tricky because I think we're very tempted to tell them this is temporary. Don't worry, this is temporary. Don't worry, this won't be the normal. With children, I'm reluctant to always do that because kids have a very bad sense of time. Like, I told my daughter that we're going on a camping trip, and I'll let you guess how many times a day I get asked, when are we going on the camping trip? Like, she's literally getting food out of the pantry and putting it in a basket. And I'm like, what are you doing? And she's like, oh, it's for the camping trip. And it's like, that is 3 weeks away.
Like, that means nothing to
that means nothing. Yeah, they have no concept of time. And so I don't think that actually is very reassuring. To an adult, it is. Because you can tell an adult, hey, listen, I know things are weird right now, guys. This is temporary. This will pass. Hang in there. Team effort. And most folks can go, okay, thanks for letting me know. Like, keep us updated. That'll get you through it. Kids, I don't think so.
How much of this is just going to be seen as, or not even seen as, how much of this is just lip service to people who don't want things to reopen at all?
Right.
But will not, like, in reality, a lot of those things just aren't going to happen. Because, it's like we're talking about, like, you just can't keep a 5-year-old in a seat for 7 hours a day. Or however long school is now. I don't know how long school is now.
Completely, yeah.
So what you're saying is that,
like, it's still going to come down to the teachers and dealing with them that way.
And I think another part of this too is that the school has to have policies and procedures in place to show that they're going to do something.
Yeah.
Right.
And so a lot of this could just be that. Right?
I'll tell you right now, anything that says students will not get out of seat, students will not, anything that speaks to student behavior, that is make-believe. You are just shouting into the wind that you have no power to address that.
I know nothing about children, and I know that.
That's not going to happen. And the teacher is in the job of educating. They're responsible to transmit information in a way that the child can digest, observe them learning it, assess whether they have it, address missing ingredients of that. And they have to have classroom management. They have to create a way to manage human behavior so that they can address the learning thing. That has to be their highest goal. And now if we impose into that this huge healthcare burden of, like, now you have to know how to be an epidemiologist in your classroom, great PSA time to say pay teachers more. Because, like, now you're asking them to do an awful lot. But B, I don't think it's humanly possible. And so I think there's some things that are just good recommendations, like, oh, we're going to space them out this much. Here's how lunch is going to be handled. That's fine. Like, hey, guys, we're not going to amass 300 children in a cafeteria so that the teachers can go take a lunch break at the same time while one adult watches them. We're not going to do that. Okay, we're going to keep the kids in 20 to 30 packs in their rooms, keep them contained, and manage lunch that way. Okay, that's a sensible thing, but you're describing adult behavior. Not just, you're describing what's going to happen with the kids, but you're not depending on the kids to do it. I think Jacob's right. I think a lot of this is just lip service. It's just like, hey, we're throwing out ideas. Hopefully this is what happens. I think that it's also going to be really, really hard because you're going to have this new confluence of factors where parents are still scared. Some parents are over it and like, hey, I'm tired of restrictions. You're going to have new opinions. Like, I don't want my kids to be overly restricted, overly hurt. I'm protective of them from that angle. Then another group of parents saying, I'm protective of my children from the healthcare angle. I'm scared that we're not doing enough. Then you're going to have teachers who feel the same way. Some teachers are like, this is not what I signed up for. You're getting in the way of me doing my job. Let me do my job. This is overreaction. Some teachers that are like, this sucks. How many adults are told that in order to earn your paycheck, you must submit yourself to, you know, a 500 by 500 square foot room with 30 other humans that are running around that are known to be the least sanitary beings on earth, and I'm supposed to be responsible for educating them, but now this is like hazard pay, you know, situation. So this is going to be weird no matter what.
Yeah. So best ways that teachers can help support the kids, I would say number one, to, like you said, not give the idea that this is going to be temporary, but just empathize and acknowledge the fact that, yes, this is challenging, but we're going to make the best of it.
Yes.
You know, and try to be as optimistic as possible.
Yes.
Demonstrate, model that behavior that you want for the kids. I think if the teachers see that, you know, Miss Thompson isn't upset by this and Miss Thompson's cool and she's calm and modeling that behavior, I think that's going to make a huge difference.
Yes. They all hate Miss Thompson anyway, though. So
yeah, you're right.
Nobody likes
Screw
Miss
Miss Thompson.
Yeah. She's terrible.
Yeah, we don't have any Thompson Patreons, do we?
No.
I don't think so.
And if there is, Johnson. Nobody likes Johnson. No, I think you're absolutely right. Like, I've referenced the movie before, Life is Beautiful. It's about World War II internment camps.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a child who the whole time thinks it's a game, and his dad makes sure that he does. And, you know, obviously it's fiction, but I think it's a beautiful illustration of how adaptable children can be. That if you just set them up correctly on day one, make it okay, we're not walking around in fear, we're not giving them our sense of panic, we're not giving them our sense of dread, we're not saying, the reason we have to do this, boys and girls, is because there's a deadly killer virus that may destroy your family when you get home, and if you love grandma, you'll do this. That's inappropriate, right? So mental health at the end of the day, I think, can be very adaptive based on the context that it's in. If you, the adult, are presenting scary time and making this scary and intrusive and complaining all the time, it will infect the children. If it's just, this is how our school works, oh well, kids can actually thrive in that. There's lots of schools across America that are varying levels of strict. There's some that have slides built in from the second floor to the first floor that fall into a ball pit. And then there's some that are like boarding schools that you wear a suit and tie to your class every day and you do not talk or you'll be writing lines on the board. And, you know, I would argue that one of those is probably a little bit more mentally encouraging than the other one, but I wouldn't say that necessarily one is a recipe for dire, you know, distress and the other one isn't. So kids are highly adaptable. It comes down to how the adults present the thing, get through the thing. And, you know, if we look back in history, some of the scariest things that have happened in human history, the great wars and the great scary things that have happened, you can adapt for the kids and make it so the kids feel like they're just going through life. This is what normal is. As long as they can adjust to normal and then you keep it there and don't keep telling them, this is temporary, one day it's going to get better. One day. Just let them adapt. Yeah. And then they'll just go. They'll just kind of stick inside the lines and they'll be fine.
Yep. You know what I just realized? What industry is really hurt by this is the ball pit industry.
Yeah. The unsung victims of this whole thing. They're going down.
Yeah, they're going to be hurt big time.
Yeah. The cesspool that is the McDonald's playground is probably not going to come back strong after the sucker's over.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone is known for a very long time that ball pits are just disgusting.
Yes.
That's the place.
It's just urine pits.
Or vomit.
Yeah.
Urine and vomit pits.
Yeah. The worst job you can have is the guy who has to get in there and clean it. But that's actually
They
the
get
best
cleaned?
job because
I
they
don't
don't
think
do
that
it.
job exists.
I don't think anybody does it because there's no second guy that checks.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I did that.
yeah, yeah, it's been done for weeks. I remember one time they found like a homeless guy sleeping. Like the kid comes over and like,
Certainly, I'm sure that's happened more than once.
Yeah.
I don't know for sure that that's happened more than once, but that's definitely happened more than once.
100% of the time there is a homeless man in the ball pit. So great question, Maple Coffee Scoop, and thank you so much for patroning our show and kicking us your breakfast money. Appreciate that.
Definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, I love having new people get on board. So thank you so much for supporting us. And with that, we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to wrap up the show. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
This week's second TheraProducer sponsor is Judy Schneider. Today's second trivia question in honor of TheraProducer Judy is: this dragon character appeared in a series of children's books and movies titled How to Train Your Dragon. I already know you know this one.
Yeah, I do.
Because this is right in your wheelhouse.
Yes, I got it.
If you'd like to join Judy Schneider and make the show possible, you can go to patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy.
The dragon's name was
Dragon.
Faug.
Found.
Got to put some swagger in it, or else you get it wrong. So it's Faug. Actually, it was Sean Connery. A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, in How to Train Your Dragon?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Sean Connery co-stars with Kevin Costner. Very, very good film for children.
Yes.
Yeah.
But he doesn't play a character. He plays himself just as a dragon.
Yes. They barely put a costume on him.
I'm a
they
dragon.
That was Ivan Drago.
You know what? That's what all my impressions sound like.
What does Speedy Gonzalez sound like, Jacob?
I'm a dragon.
Yeah, okay.
I must break you.
It just happens. That's the phrase that I always use too.
This is my one impression. Take it or leave it. Yeah.
So I was doing I was filling out a thing the other day or yesterday actually. I was filling out a thing yesterday for a voiceover thing that I'm signing up for.
Really?
Oh,
okay.
And it's just like because I feel stupid. I'm like I've got all the equipment at my house.
Yeah, hell yeah. You do.
To do good voiceover stuff, and SJ's already been doing it, and it's starting to go pretty well. And so she was like, "Why don't you sign up?" It's like, "Oh yeah, that's true. I mean, I can just put clips of my voice on there, and if that's what people want, I don't know why they would want it, but if that's what they want, they can have that.
Oh, they want it.
Great. So there's this whole list of like, what kind of accents can you do? And I mean, this is a list of hundreds of different accents.
You shouldn't
and
even click American. That shouldn't even leave that box unchecked.
It was all I was like, all right, North American, fine. Like whatever this is, fine. But then it was like, okay, I can do like Texas, and like South Louisiana, and American South, like general.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's about it.
Yeah, you got 2 boxes.
That's about it.
America, Southern United States.
Yeah,
and scene.
Yeah.
How many phrases can you do? 1. It's the dragon.
It has to do with the dragon.
As long as very specific voiceover work.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
You know what? I'm going to have to reject this proposal. It's just not my thing.
Yeah.
I only work with dragons.
Yeah, what's this, Colgate? Okay. Cool. So, like, how do you guys...
the dragon of toothpaste?
Yeah, how are you guys weaving this in? Sir, this is oddly specific.
Now hear me out. Hear me out. 4
out of 5 dragons.
No, it's Colgate. It's a neat thing. It's a because SJ's been doing audiobooks.
That's cool.
But this other thing is you have things, they get sent to you based on the criteria of your profile. And then you record a quick little sample, like a 30-second sample of what they're looking for, and just send it into them. And if they pick you, then you do it. And the bits are usually like 90 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah. Or it might be like a lot of podcasts go to services like this to get intros for the podcast.
Oh yeah.
Huh.
Like if you had just a standard intro, especially for like single host podcasts, it'll the music will play and be like, this week from the and now you're a host.
Right.
Yeah.
Insert name here.
Right. But I mean, you would actually do the whole thing because it's specific just for that show.
Oh wow. Oh.
Yeah. So like if Jim was doing a solo podcast, you'd send over the music to me, along with the script that you want done for it, And then I would just do it, and it'd be like, and it would end with, and now your host, Dr. Jim Jobin.
That's interesting.
Huh. It's kind of like
And I would do it in that voice.
Oh, I hope that 100% of the time you do.
It's kind of like the graphic design place that we went through.
Only
it's just
99 designs.
It's just that, but with voiceover stuff.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
That is cool.
It's a neat thing.
That
and I was
really
like, this is stupid that I'm not just doing this.
Yeah, you've got.
It's stupid that I'm not doing this, all the time. Forget about a pandemic,
It
quarantine stuff. I should
have
just
so much equipment.
I should just be doing this anyway.
Yeah, just randomly.
There's literally a $1,000 microphone sitting on my desk at my house right now.
Just holding down paper
that I use to when I go on Night Attacks happy hour, I talk into that.
Yeah, when I'm Zooming with people.
Right. Because, here it is.
Why not?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, man. So they just send you random things and say, hey, give it your best shot, and you just throw it in there. And then if that's...
And you pick the ones that you want to pick and that look good for you and everything. And
that's pretty cool. Is there even commercial work on there where they're
there is.
You get to do the whole
SJ just sent one in last night for Carvana.
Oh, cool.
Oh,
wow.
That's awesome.
You should sign up for all the pharmaceutical commercial ones and then just do your auctioneer voice to get through all the side effects and symptoms.
Yeah. I think this was on ICS the other day. We were talking about some of those, but I saw one a couple of months ago that one of the side effects was unbearable pain. What is...
Oh my god!
And I don't remember what the drug was. I don't remember what it was for.
You better fucking look it up.
I was like, what the fuck side effect? Unbearable pain is better than whatever this drug is for? It's better to be like death cure.
The adjective alone should tell you it's not. This is not.
It's literally unbearable.
Yeah,
you cannot bear this pain.
Permanent unbearable pain and mental anguish.
Maybe that's the idea. That this will make whatever you have feel okay.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. You won't be thinking about your...
That won't bother you at all.
You got athlete's foot? Take one of these.
Because you'll just be screaming.
Oh my god, yeah. Hellscape.
You'll scream for the first half an hour. After that, you won't scream anymore. Not because the pain is gone, but because you won't be able to physically scream anymore.
I want. Was that right at the top, or did they squeeze it in there? Kind of.
It was squeezed in.
Yeah,
it was the 8th thing down.
I want to see the guy who read that out loud in front of a mic and just watch his eyes pop up.
This was a TV spot where they just where they list the possible side effects in small print at the bottom.
Oh my god.
Which made me wonder. It honestly made me wonder. I was like, did the graphics guy just squeeze that in there?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That would be funny.
Is the graphics guy just fucking with somebody?
Yeah.
Do they just
and no one caught it.
Yeah.
He got it.
He was like, you know what the guys over at Cialis aren't checking on?
Yeah.
The small print.
He did it on a dare.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh, he did it.
That's what I really hope that's what it was.
That would be funny. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm getting laid off tomorrow anyway. So.
Yeah. This is the end. This is the last day on the job.
Hey, nobody knows how to take this graphic out once I put it in.
They already cut the commercial.
They can run the commercial or not.
Throw it in there with the unbearable pain. But, you might get laid.
Yeah. There you go.
You got to roll the dice. Sometimes you just got to roll the dice.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Oh, my motor is so rigid.
I have that effect. The pain is unbearable. Well, I wouldn't say unbearable, but, yeah. Well, on that note, thank you for all of you who support our show.
So we're recording this way earlier than we usually do. So if we have any new THERAPALs, THERAPODs, THERAPRODUCERs, THERADACTYLs, thank you, and we'll get you next week.
Yep, so we're recording this one earlier, but we do want to thank our bosses, the mysterious and shrouded Illuminati members of our fan club. Thank you, Smitty Scoop, Jake Schneider, Robert Brownie Jr. Mint, Kayla Lansbury, Ellie O'Dare, Judy Schneider, Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop, Dr. Ben Don, and ex officio board member Crazy Banana Scoop.
And if you'd like to hear this episode uncut and unedited and enjoy our spontaneous side projects, go to patreon.com/therapy, and thank you for supporting mental health.
That's all the time that we have for this week's session. We want to thank our Landlord's Ice Cream Social podcast and our special guest, John a magician in Las Vegas. Thanks to those of you who contributed to our show today. We really appreciate it. Remember, the Pod Therapy is something you should not keep all to yourself. Share this episode with somebody who needs it by opening the episode's description in your podcast app and copying and pasting that link provided into your social media. Don't forget, you can find us at facebook.com/podtherapy, on Twitter at PodTherapyGuys, and at patreon.com/therapy.
If you want to submit a question to the show, ask anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. I'm Nick Tanchman.
I'm Jim Jobin.
Thanks, and we'll see you for your appointment next week.
Smaug.
Faug. Daug.